much you would concur, Bríd Smith in our Dáil studio.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really understand why they need this layer of special advisors on top of what they're already entitled to. I mean, every TD is entitled to a PA and a secretary. I have a PA and a secretary, and I don't understand why a junior minister in particular, who has a junior role, should be entitled to more special advisors. But I think the more shocking thing is the figures that are coming out in terms of the numbers of special advisors that have been appointed to the Taoiseach, the Taoiseach and Eamon Ryan, which I believe is in the order of 10 each. Now, that just means...
I think it's about 6 each, isn't it? Something in the order of 5 or 6 each?
I heard 10 for Eamon Ryan this morning, but whatever it is, it's absolutely a ridiculous amount of pampering and attention on those who have the roles and the responsibilities. And don't forget, behind that, there's also a layer of departmental civil servants and advisors, and advice comes through them as well. So it's hard to understand why this increase has to take place in this complex arrangement between 3 different parties. And it seems to me that if one gets it, the other wants it, and if one gets another one, the other wants it. But it doesn't make sense to the public. And I can tell you, the barrage of anger to the TDs this morning, particularly over the TDs' pay rise, in line with the increase in junior minister positions, advisor positions, and the cuts to the pandemic unemployment payment. It sends out all the wrong signals about we are all in this together.
In fairness, when we talk about signals, is it the case that ministers have foregone their increase and have done over the years, that to a large extent those increases aren't drawn down?
Well, my understanding is they've forgone the ministerial increase, but not the TD part of the increase. And, you know, that's no big pain, because we are on very, very good money already. It isn't a big pain to forgo that. And ministers in particular are on big money and very fat pensions. So, but the perception to the public is you cut us while you look after yourselves. Now, in saying this, I don't want to see any public servant go without their 2% increase. The nurses, the teachers, the civil servants, the army, all of those people who look after our society, they absolutely need their increase. In fact, they were held back over this period of FEMPI. But this should not apply to politicians, either in the Seanad or in the Dáil.
But it's the same rise, isn't it? It's the FEMPI rise that we're talking about, as opposed to a pay hike in any other guise, correct?
I'm correct. You're correct about that. But the point is that this shouldn't apply to the well-paid public representatives, either in the Seanad or the Dáil.
Okay.
And if it does apply, then we have to find a mechanism of giving it back or donating it back or whatever it is.
Right.
I have to say that up to now, I have lived on the same wage as a bus driver. We've always made it part of our election manifesto. That's what we take as the average industrial wage. Okay. And the rest goes into a solidarity fund. But that apart, I think it shows an obscenity in the thinking, and as somebody said, it's tone deaf to how people feel and think through this pandemic.
Thanks, Bríd. No sooner are we fair, does it not, Bríd Smith? I mean, is it fair to have one cohort of workers benefiting from a COVID bounce, to put it like that?
Well, I think when you take into account how they measured what you were earning before the PUP kicked in, they measured it on the earnings that you had in January and February. And we know there are a huge cohort of seasonal and part-time workers in this country. And directly after Christmas, there are a lot of workers in places like retail and entertainment, etc., who would have been earning more prior to Christmas, and then their work falls in the months of January and February. So it's not necessarily reflective of their true earnings. So in January and February, they're earning less. And I do think that if you think about the amount, it's not a princely sum, 350 a week down to 300, and for some from 300 a week down to 250. Taking €50 out of that minimal amount is actually a huge cut. And this, remember, is at a time when the moratorium on mortgages and the rent freezes, etc., has ended, and there are lots of bills to be paid.
Can I ask you, Bríd Smith, just for clarity, of that 209,000, as Danny said, recipients of the PUP, is it the vast majority then that would be seeing a €50 cut in their take-home pay every week? Or is it a percentage, a minority or a majority?
Well, all of them will see a €50 cut. It just depends on whether they're being cut from 350 to 300 or 300, 350. Some of them will see a €100 cut. And then there's the wage subsidy scheme, which is also being cut. And that's very vicious, from 412 down to 203, with no oversight on the employers and no compunction for them to top up.
So you don't accept Minister Humphrey's explanation that it's not, that this was brought in order to bring people's wages, or sorry, their take-home pay into line with what they would have been receiving before the virus hit?
No, she's not correct. And as Danny said, there are a huge amount of anomalies, and many people would have been earning more at different times of the year, or they would have been earning more when you pan out the year overall. So people do struggle on this, and it is a minimum payment. And just to repeat, if we are asking people to stay with us, to follow the public health guidelines, which I absolutely believe we should do, we need to send out the signal that in this we are in it together. So politicians shouldn't be getting a pay rise, and people's payments on unemployment should not be cut.
Do you say, Bríd Smith, to the argument that we are borrowing vast sums of money? I think the figure for next year is 19 billion. Actually, we'll come back to that question, Bríd Smith. Let's hand over to the Dáil. Mary Lou McDonald on her feet. Thanks.
General Secretary.
1,000 workers being directly supported by the government. And he also mentioned those low-paid workers. He said the minimum wage was the 4th highest in Europe. That's something presumably you wouldn't be in agreement with.
Well, I mean, if in terms of the amount of euro per hour they receive, it's the 4th highest, but then you have to factor into account the cost of living in this country, the cost of rent, the cost of mortgages, the cost of childcare, food. Everything is way more expensive than on the average in Europe. So you can't just extrapolate the amount from the actual cost of living that people face on a daily basis. And it's not true to say that they're the best off group of low paid workers across Europe. It's just not true when you measure all of the expenditure against the income. But look, we made a submission to the Low Pay Commission. Looking at it this morning, it was on the 13th of March, just before lockdown. We were never really able to do anything with it. But we extensively researched the actual needs of people on the minimum wage. And we came to the conclusion that over a period of about 4 years, they needed to rise the minimum wage from where it was at to a living wage of €15. And a living wage of €15 is accepted by all sorts of organisations like Social Justice Ireland, Vincent de Paul, the ICTU, etc., as being what we should be able to pay our low-paid workers. Now, I understand...
And did that analysis, Bríd Smith, look into the competitiveness of such a wage? In other words, its effect on the economy, on jobs, on employers deciding to base their businesses here?
It did indeed. And what you find is that people on low pay, the lowest paid workers, are the ones who spend their money because they don't save and because they don't hoard. They actually put that money back into the local economy. They're more likely to spend in the shops, the hairdressers, the cafes, etc. That money then gets recirculated, but they need that as a minimum to live on. And we'll be fighting for that.
Just a couple of minutes left in the programme. I want to touch on Roisin Shortall's comment. You made the point also, Bríd Smith, that public health transcends party politics. Is Roisin Shortall's suggestion, is it something that you'd buy into?
Well, just before I came on this programme, I was looking at the COVID committee, and there was a discussion between scientists and the committee. And Richard Boyd Barrett actually said we need open public debate on this. And the scientists corrected him and said, absolutely, we would welcome that. But we'd like it to be a discussion that's open, that's public, that involves politicians and the scientists. Because to be honest with you, most of us who are elected don't understand the science, and we don't understand the public health measures that need to be taken. We need the scientists of all hues involved in this debate, and it needs to be open and probably on the public record, recorded and transmitted by our public broadcaster, so that people are informed and can learn, because it is easy to get your head around the science once you have it explained to you. And there are differences of opinion, and there's political difference of opinion, but that debate, discussion, whatever you may call it, needs to happen in public, not just with politicians, but with scientists and public health.
Can I ask you very quickly, just on that contribution from Thomas Pringle, is it something that you have a view on? He was talking about partners being excluded from scans and the impact on all of this on expectant women. Do you take a view on that?
I absolutely do. I have huge support and sympathy for the women, and I also would support the views of the medical professions. But we do have to look at this. We cannot have the sad situations that Tommy read out from the letter, the letters that are coming into us from women who are pregnant or giving birth. We can't have that continue. Surely there must be a way of protecting their partners with proper PPE, etc., so that they can be present with them when these moments of either tragedy or joy, or maybe neither, are happening, but they need to have that support, and I think we have to look at that urgently.
I suppose this, many would